Did you know Freedom Rocks has swag? You can help stimulate the economy and show how much you like Freedom Rocks at the same time. We've got t-shirts for men and women. We've got coffee mugs and beer steins. We've got food and beverage thermoses. You can get your own Freedom Rocks swag with the show logo, as seen in the opening title of the show, right here at our Cafe Press shop. That's cafepress.com/freedomrocks.
Hi, welcome to Freedom Rocks. I'm your host, Max Kessler. Joining me today is Mark Glogowski to talk about the structure of society and how it's changed over the last 100 years.
Good evening, Max. I am very concerned about the structure of the society in the United States because it has changed. It's changed so dramatically that people really don't understand what it used to be. 100 years ago, we passed an amendment to the Constitution called the 16th Amendment.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one.
A favorite for libertarians to hate, yes.
Yes. That's the one that authorized Congress to issue the income tax. Well, just to give you some facts, in 1894, Congress issued an income tax, and in 1896, the U.S. Supreme Court said income tax is unconstitutional. Well, the Democrats and Republicans decided that they wanted the income tax, and they decided just to change the Constitution. So in 1909, they passed a bill authorizing the 16th Amendment, which would give Congress the authority to issue a tax. And then in 1913, 36 Democrat and Republican states ratified the 16th Amendment. Back then, I mean, it really didn't matter how it was ratified. It didn't matter whether it was done by popular vote in the state or by the vote of the state Congress. Or if the state legislature, or if it was done strictly by the two state appointees, their senators, going to Congress and saying New York State ratified it. It was ratified, and there was a big argument: was it legal? Was it constitutional? The Supreme Court recognized the fact that the 16th Amendment was ratified. But in 1916, the U.S. Supreme Court not only recognized that the 16th Amendment was ratified, but they also said that the 16th Amendment and the income tax are both unconstitutional, but now it's the law of the land.
How can a constitutional amendment be unconstitutional? Because a constitutional amendment is changing what is or isn't constitutional.
No, a constitutional amendment is changing what is law. If you, for instance, let's take murder. You just randomly go out and shoot somebody. That's murder. If you have the authority to go out and randomly shoot somebody, it's still murder, even though you may have the legal authority to do so.
It's not legally murder.
Well, it's not legally murder, but it's still murder. You're still killing somebody for no reason. And with the case of the 16th Amendment, income tax is unconstitutional. And the reason it's unconstitutional is because it creates a structure in our society where the government becomes your master. And 100% of everything you earn now belongs to the federal government. It doesn't matter whether it's legal or illegal or gambling income, you have to report it. And under this new structure, you have to report every year, every penny you earn. It gives the federal government the authority to decide to say 100% of what you earn belongs to the federal government. It's not your money, it's their money. The federal government has the authority to tell you how much you can keep and how you have to spend what they allow you to keep, or they can just take more of it back. To illustrate how illegal income belongs to the federal government, look at Al Capone. What did he go to jail for? Not reporting his illegal income. Look at Obamacare. The U.S. Supreme Court said 100% of Obamacare is unconstitutional. And Justice Roberts come along and with his decision, and he also said, but Congress has the authority to issue a tax. That is the law of the land. If you don't like the law of the land, only the Congress, at the assistance of the people, can change the law of the land. The 16th Amendment is the law of the land. That law of the land allows Congress it gives Congress the unconstitutional authority to issue an unconstitutional tax, which prevents you from being free because you have to report every year to the federal government.
Okay, but how is a constitutional amendment unconstitutional? For example, the 10th Amendment, the 10th Amendment reserves a bunch of powers to the states, any powers that are neither delegated to the United States nor prohibited by it to the states, prohibited by the Constitution to the states. But the 13th Amendment prohibits states from allowing slavery. So by your logic, wouldn't the 13th Amendment be unconstitutional because it infringes on a power that was formerly delegated or formerly reserved to the states?
To a large extent, it is unconstitutional because what happens is it destroys the Constitution. Now, there's a lot of things about the Constitution that could be refined, and the whole concept of slavery, there was a big argument at the time whether or not slavery should be legal or illegal when they came up with this 3/4 rule or whatever it was.
3/5.
3/5.
But that was about the census.
It was about the census, and it also had to do with allocation of representation in Congress.
Well, that's what the census is for, allocation of representation, because the slave states wanted to have it both ways. They wanted to treat human beings like property, but they also wanted those very same human beings to count for the census to increase the state's recorded population to get the state more representation in Congress. But if a constitutional amendment changes what is allowed or prohibited by the Constitution, then how is that amendment itself unconstitutional?
Well, the Constitution was created to ensure that you were free to make your own decisions. That when you went out to earn a living, that you owned your income. That when you decided to spend that income, you determined where it would go. The 16th Amendment destroyed that structure. It basically said you are no longer in control of decisions as to how you're going to spend the money because it's not your money.
Okay.
And once you did that, the structure that the U.S. Constitution was intended to create and preserve
Intended to create
and preserve
and
was
preserve,
destroyed. That
and
structure
preserve.
was destroyed.
Intended to create and preserve. Fine, but when you amend the Constitution, you change what the Constitution means. So
if you change what the Constitution means,
means,
did you destroy it, or is it just
altered, not necessarily destroyed.
Well, what's happened in society is over the course of 100 years, the structure that was created for our country by the 16th Amendment, it instantly had impact in that very year, because one of the things in that structure that changed was senators were representatives of the state, and they went to Congress to approve budgets to make sure that the House took and they proposed a budget and it was within acceptable ranges that the Senate would accept. Then they would come back and argue with the state to have the state contribute to the federal government to pay for the budget that was approved.
Okay.
When the 16th Amendment went into effect, basically there was no role for the senators because the money was going straight from the people to the government.
I'm going to have to interrupt you. Sorry. We'll be right back.
Did you know high-quality versions of all episodes of Freedom Rocks are available on DVD? Each DVD contains 3 episodes for just $15. We also have specials that aren't on RCTV or YouTube. You can find links to all of our DVDs on the Freedom Rocks website, freedomrocks.cybermansoftware.com.
Welcome back to Freedom Rocks. Once again, I'm Max Kessler, and my guest is Mark Glogowski, talking about the structure of society. Now, before the break, we were talking about the senators, and I'm going to get to the 17th Amendment shortly.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So the senator's job was to basically approve the budget, come back to the states, argue for the states to contribute to the federal treasury so that the government, but the federal government could operate. And we had a representative government because the states basically had representation in the government. With the 16th Amendment, the money goes straight from you to the federal government because it's not your money. What the role for the state senators now disappeared. So the wisdom of the federal government was, let's have the senators elected directly from the people because that's where the money's coming from. It's not coming from the states anymore.
Well, there was more to it than just the senators approving the budget. There was also the Senate, as it was intended to act as a ballast for legislation, not just budgetary legislation, but any sort of legislation. It was supposed to act as a balancing force where the senators were protected from the will of the majority. Because the will of the majority, public opinion, changes with the winds. If you ever watch the news, you see, oh, such and such, so many people support, such a percentage of people support this now, and 2 weeks ago, some other percentage of people supported it. The purpose of a Senate is to be a stabilizing force by protecting the senators from having to
But
find out where the wind is
that's
blowing.
only true if in where we have a democracy where the will of the people is done basically by activists and anyone out there that can scream loud enough to get their voices heard. The senators, according to that theory, would be the balancing force so that they would be pretty much immune.
Right.
Well, they're only immune if they don't have to go back to these very same people and get elected. So that's the reason why they were appointed.
That was why they were elected by state legislatures instead of elected by.
And they were supposed to represent the interests of the state, which is a little bit different than the interests of the common person. The state has a lot of other responsibilities that the average person never even has to think about. But with the 16th Amendment, the flow of funds that used to be collected at the local level, the towns, villages, and cities, passed to the counties, where now the towns, villages, and cities had oversight over the county budget. The counties used to pass to the state, and the counties would have oversight of the state budget. States would pass to the federal government, and the states would have oversight over the federal government budget. With the 16th Amendment now making the representation by of the states by the senators irrelevant, the 17th Amendment came into effect, and that did allow the senators to be allowed to be elected directly by the people. States lost their representations. Most of the states then instantly adopted the same situation where they implemented a state tax, and all the representation going backward down to the individual is gone. We do not live in a republic. We do not have elected officials representing us. Every elected official out there, because of this new structure created by the 16th Amendment, every elected official is a representative of the government. Their job is to make sure that if you have a problem and the government is stopping you from doing something, you go to the representative that's appropriate and you ask them to stop the government from stopping you. And that's their job. The other half of their job is the government has programs. Their job is to get out there and promote those programs no matter what. And one good example of those programs is IDAs and empire zones. Here we have basically tyranny in America. Because what they do is they take from this group of people and they select a few people over here and they give your money to them. And they get all the benefits. Now, they're saying, well, they're only taxes. It's not real benefits. We're just allowing them not to pay taxes for a while. Well, if those taxes are real, really necessary for the government to collect in the first place, then someone else has to pick up that tab that they're not paying. So they're going to get a free ride from the rest of you. And that's tyranny. And that's part of our structure that flows back to the 16th Amendment. Now, I would like to throw out one more thing about the structure. And that all these people running around shouting about the Second Amendment and their gun rights, let's face it, the federal government can come down and pick up guns anytime they want. Not because of the Second Amendment, But because since 1913, every gun was purchased with federal government money. And if they decided they did not want you to spend it that way, or they now don't want you to spend it that way or to have those benefits, they can just come down and pick it up because of the 16th Amendment. They own everything in the country. Basically, the whole wealth of the country now is the property of the federal government, which is the whole reason why the Federal Reserve was created. And it was all this happened in the same year. February, the 16th Amendment, the 17th Amendment in September, the Federal Reserve sometime September, December era, and it was being created because the federal government realized they have all of this wealth they have to manage, and the best way to manage it is to have an organization that can manage it. Federal Reserve, you're responsible for the economy, you're responsible for the wealth of the country, and by the way, we'll give you a legal arm to go out there and actually collect whatever you need. That's called the IRS. It's the biggest terrorist organization in the world.
Yeah, and I
so you're looking at the clock. And
yeah, I understand they're coming under a bit of scrutiny for going after these conservative organizations. Although here's one area where I really have to blame Fox News, even though they're the ones covering this IRS scandal, is that Fox News is the one out there referring to all these candidates as quote-unquote Tea Party candidates. Well, you think there's a reason the IRS thinks these Tea Party organizations are political parties? When you got all the major media, all the mainstream media, including Fox News, telling everybody that so-and-so's a Tea Party candidate? And there are Tea Party organizations that actually run candidates. So the IRS can't really, it's kind of tough for the IRS to discern this organization that calls itself Tea Party doesn't endorse any candidates, so it can be a 501c4. This organization does endorse candidates, so it can't be a 501c4. But it's tough for them to figure it all out because there are some of these Tea Party organizations that are trying to be political parties. But I do have to pause for another PSA break. We'll be right back.
Have you ever played WTF Sudoku?
You mean WTF as in what the f?
Yes.
What the f is so all fired? What the f about Sudoku?
Regular Sudoku is played on a 9x9 grid with exactly one of every digit 1 through 9 in every row, column, and 3x3 grid.
So what?
WTF Sudoku is played on a 25x25 grid with exactly one of every letter A through Y in every row, column, and 5x5 group.
WTF. How can I play WTF Sudoku?
You can play it online at www.cybermansoftware.com/games. You can also buy a book of puzzles on Amazon.com. Just search for WTF Sudoku.
Book? You mean on paper?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's www.cybermansoftware.com/games or by searching for WTF Sudoku on Amazon.com?
Yes.
Welcome back to Freedom Rocks, which is available on DVD. Once again, I'd like to remind you that this is a cable access program. That means we don't get Nielsen ratings. So we don't know you're watching unless you tell us you're watching, which you can do by swinging by this website at the bottom of your screen, Freedom Rocks, that's freedomrocks.cybermansoftware.com. So we were talking about the income reduction service?
Yes. The IRS is a very unique organization in this country. It has its own court system. It makes up its own rules. One of the things I personally found out going through the entire system was that the rules are very arbitrary. They implement them what they want, and when you go into an IRS court, they flip the rules upside down so that where you think that you are the defendant and that they have to prove their case, that is not true. They are the defendant in their court, and you have to prove that they are wrong, and that you don't have to prove that you're right. And what everybody does is try to prove that they're right, and they're out there making accusations They don't have to follow the rules of evidence. Intimidation and basically terrorism in the court is not expected if you have to go that far. The statistics for the number of people that get to IRS court in front of a judge and actually have a judicial decision on their case is pathetic. It's like 1 or 2 out of 200,000. Everyone is intimidated into accepting a settlement. I personally and my wife were threatened with 5 years of jail because they were going to refile charges against us, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fines and penalties, all because what I did was create a company that didn't make money in 3 years, and they called it a hobby. Well, it's not a hobby when you spend the kind of money I spent trying to implement a process that is beneficial to the country and would have, if I was successful, have been very lucrative. And I could have I proved that to the courts, but they just rejected the proof. Because I did not prove that the IRS was wrong. I was trying to prove that I was correct. So we have this situation in the country with the IRS where they really are the agency most feared. Right now, more people are in fear of losing their homes and their possessions because of the IRS than any terrorist that's out there. And that situation is tied directly back to the 16th Amendment and the structure of our society that was created back then. If we want to save our Second Amendment rights, and if we want to have freedom again,
And First Amendment, and
we have to
I don't think the Third
rescind the
Amendment's
16th
under
Amendment.
attack.
The 16th Amendment has to go, and it should be
16th
a
and
priority
17th.
from now until it's gone for every single politician that gets elected. And if it's not their priority to get rid of the 16th Amendment, then don't elect them, because otherwise you will see society continue to change. The changes from 1913 to now are just the tip of the iceberg.
Ooh, yeah, that's kind of scary. But yeah, definitely. I don't think there's a whole lot of people out there willing to defend the IRS. Even the people who support redistribution of wealth don't like the IRS.
But there is, especially when it comes to taxes, there's a better way to tax. A sales tax, people don't like sales tax because it's visible. But that is actually one of the biggest benefits of a sales tax, is that you know how much the government's costing you every time you make a payment and you buy something. You pay a sales tax. And if you don't spend any money, you don't have to pay any more taxes with a sales tax. We should get rid of the school tax, real estate tax. We should get rid of all the real estate taxes, town and state. We should get rid of the income tax. All of those are basically an assessment that denies you the right to liberty and the right to property. And if we got rid of it and implemented a sales tax in exchange for that, it's not that much more. According to Warren Buffett, a 3% sales tax would mean that you would, to the federal government, would mean that you would never have to again report to the federal government how much you earn, how you spend it, or where you keep it. It's none of the government's business. And for businesses themselves, think what that would mean if they did not have to fill out income tax forms and obey the IRS's rules on where they spend their money.
Okay, so you're saying that at least according to Warren Buffett, this country's government, the constitutional functions of this country's government,
came out
can be
last year.
funded by just a 3% sales tax?
He said a 3% across the board sales tax on everything in the gross domestic product should be more than enough to keep our federal government running. And if we reverse the flow of the funds from the local to the federal and have oversight again, yes, it's more than enough money to keep the government going, because we have so much graft and corruption in our government, it's pathetic. And we don't have the oversight, which is why the state spends the money the way it does. Nobody has oversight over the state budget. So, yeah, I think we need to very seriously look at replacing the income tax and then the real estate tax with a sales tax, and rescinding the 16th Amendment.
Now, what about poor people? Because sales taxes tend to be what's called regressive, in that if some guy barely making ends meet has to pay a 3% sales tax, that's going to hurt him a whole lot more than Bill Gates or Warren Buffett paying a 3%
Well,
sales tax.
if we really needed to address that issue and it became a real problem for the people, why not have a progressive sales tax? Anything under $1, you pay 1%. Anything under $10 to $1, you pay 2%. And you keep going up. So people that buy a $10,000 item will end up paying 5%. And people that buy a $10 million item would pay 7%. And so we have a progressive tax. And if you buy 100 $1 items, they're $1 items. So only the big people, the rich people, will pay the higher percentages, which is exactly what everybody wants anyway.
Okay. Well, we've just about reached the end of another episode. Thank you again for joining me.
It's been my pleasure.
Once again, we welcome your comments at the show website, Freedom Rocks, freedomrocs.cybermansoftware.com. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. If you'd like to be on the show, if you support a libertarian issue and would like to discuss it, or if you oppose a libertarian issue and would like to debate with us on the counterpoint, we'd like to hear from you.